Thanks for joining us today for our webinar. We're happy to have you with us. My name's Amy Perkins, and I'm the marketing manager for our assessment tools here at Brooks Publishing. This webinar is on using the number sense screener, or the NSS, to screen early numerical competencies and identify students at risk for later math struggles. And we're happy to have Nancy Jordan, the NSS co-developer, here with us to share a presentation about the tool. But first, I'd like to go over some brief housekeeping tasks. So you'll be in listen-only mode for the webinar, but if you have any questions, please type them into the question box on your GoToWebinar bar, or you can tweet them using hashtag #TalkAboutTools. We'll take these questions after the presentation during the Q&A at the end. For best audio and screen quality, you may want to exit any unneeded programs. And for the presentation, you also might want to minimize the GoToWebinar bar on your monitor so you can see more of the PowerPoint presentation, and you can do that by clicking the orange button with the arrow in the top corner of the control bar. And then if you would need to enlarge the bar to ask a question, you can just click the orange button again and it'll pop back out. Also, I wanted to let everyone know that we're recording the webinar, and you'll receive a link to the recording in a follow-up email tomorrow. And we'll also be posting a link to the recording on our website. So feel free to, after the presentation, share the email with your colleagues or watch it again. So we're happy, as I said earlier, to have Nancy Jordan here with us. So I'd like to introduce her. Nancy's principal investigator of the Number Sense Intervention Project, as well as the Center for Improving Learning of Fractions. She's author or co-author of many articles in mathematics learning difficulties, and has recently published articles in Child Development, Journal of Learning Disabilities, Developmental Science, Developmental Psychology, and Journal of Educational Psychology. Dr. Jordan holds a bachelor's degree from the University of Iowa, where she was awarded Phi Beta Kappa, and a master's degree from Northwestern University. She received her doctoral degree in education from Harvard University and completed a postdoctoral fellowship at the University of Chicago. Before beginning her doctoral studies, she taught elementary school children with special needs. Dr. Jordan served on the Committee on Early Childhood Mathematics of the National Research Council of the National Academies. So we're very happy to have Nancy here with us to share information about the number sense screener. So Nancy.
Yes, hi.
Hi.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi. Oh, and Amy, one thing you left off is I'm a professor in the School of Education at the University of Delaware.
Yes.
Anyone can contact me.
Great. Thank you for adding that.
Sure. Okay, should I get started?
Yeah, that would be great.
Okay, well, it's a pleasure to be here, and I hope people will feel free to ask questions and clarifications. And the topic of the presentation is catching math struggles early with the NSS, or the Number Sense Screener. My co-author on the Number Sense Screener is Joseph Gluding, who is also a professor of education at the University of Delaware, and he's a psychometrician. So I'm going to start by presenting an overview of the NSS. This screener came out of my extensive research on children's learning mathematics and how to identify learning difficulties in math. So it is a research-based tool for screening key numerical competencies in kindergarten and into early first grade. The areas are aligned with the Common Core state standards and thus are very well suited for planning interventions. And interestingly, we actually wrote a lot of the NSS before the Common Core state standards were published, but I think a lot of our work was very influential in creating the Common Core state standards. In fact, some of my research is cited in there, and I was a reviewer on the standards, so I think that we were kind of ahead of the game there. The battery or screener includes 29 items. It has norms for the fall and spring of kindergarten and the fall of first grade. So it's really suitable up through the first part of first grade. It takes about 15-20 minutes to conduct, and it's given on a one-to-one basis. So to provide you some background, it's important to keep in mind that kindergarten math is very important. And interestingly, kindergarten achievement more generally has far-reaching consequences. Recent studies in economics have shown that kindergarten test scores, including those in math, are associated with college attendance, earning potential, and financial management, even when the background characteristics of the children are held constant, such as their social class, their gender, their IQ, and so on. Also, kindergarten math concepts are powerful predictors of adolescent learning outcomes across content areas, so not just in math, but in other areas like STEM disciplines, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. Now, within the domain of early math, research has shown that number sense is especially important. Of course, those of you who are early childhood and kindergarten teachers, you know that the most early childhood math curricula cover multiple topics, but number sense is of primary importance during this age period. And if you look at the kindergarten math topics on the Common Core state standards, most of them are associated with number competencies related to whole numbers, number relations, and number operations. And even the measurement and geometry standards do require children to use number words and concepts. It's important to keep in mind, though, that number sense is heavily influenced by experience and instruction. Children come to kindergarten with very different levels of number sense. In general, our research and the research of others has shown that low-income children enter kindergarten with less number knowledge than their middle-income peers. And deficient number sense has been shown to be a core marker for severe and persistent learning disabilities in mathematics, sometimes also referred to as dyscalculia. But the good news is that the efforts to teach number sense to high-risk children have resulted in significant gains in math achievement compared to control groups. So number sense is malleable and it can be taught to most children, which then leads to improved outcomes. But despite the importance of early number development and the growing body of evidence that number sense can be taught to young children, the National Research Council's Committee on Early Childhood Math concludes that most early childhood programs spend little focused time on math, and most of it is low in instructional quality. Many opportunities are missed for learning math over the course of the preschool day. So, therefore, a lot of children will enter kindergarten unprepared for learning math. So, what is number sense? Sometimes also referred to as number competencies or number knowledge. It's generally agreed in the research that number sense in the 3 to 6-year-old range involves interrelated abilities involving numbers, number relations, and number operations. And this would include skills such as the immediate recognition of small quantities, such that if you see 3 objects, you know or you can apprehend immediately that there are 3 without even counting. The technical term for this is subitization, you may have heard. Or you see 4 dots or whatever, you can immediately know that there are 4 items. Also, children can count items in a collection to at least 5, and that they know that the final word in the count set indicates how many are in the set, which is referred to as the cardinality principle, and that final count word has special primary meaning. Also, children, number sense involves discriminating between small quantities, knowing that 4 is greater than 3, or 2 is less than 5. Children eventually are able to compare numerical magnitudes. They know that 5 is 2 more than 3, so they're a little more exacting there with the comparisons, which then helps them operate on small sets by adding and taking away items. Now, our number sense screener is relevant to response to intervention, or RTI, service delivery models that are increasingly being used in today's schools. The number sense screener can help professionals to screen and identify students at risk for math difficulties early, and can help develop evidence-based solutions into students' abilities. So, based on the definition of number sense and the core abilities that are especially important for early learning, the NSS is divided into 3 basic sub-areas related to number relations, and number operations. Under number, there are counting items and items involving number recognition. For relations, children are asked to compare numbers, and for operations, they are asked to perform addition and subtraction calculations in 3 contexts, which would be nonverbal calculations, story problems, and number combinations. And I will show you examples of each of these types of items. So let's look at counting knowledge. Children will be shown sets of stars presented in a horizontal line. The examiner will say, here are some stars. I want you to count each star. Touch each star as you count. And then, after the children are finished counting, you turn over the paper and ask, how many stars were on the paper you just saw? And if the child understands the principle of cardinality and knows that the final word in the count set has special meaning, they'll say 5. We also ask the children to simply count as high as they can to get a sense of their knowledge of the count sequence. Number recognition involves just being able to recognize written numerals and to state them, starting with the lower ones, 13, 37, 82, and 124. Now 124 is hard for a lot of children, but it will, a child who is able to do that at the beginning of kindergarten will show you that he or she has a pretty good knowledge of the count sequence. In terms of number comparisons, children are asked what number comes right after 7, or what number comes 2 numbers after 7, or which number is closer to 5, 6, or 2. And then in terms of operations, our first type of task involves nonverbal calculations. Watch what I do, and the examiner covers the dots with a box with an opening in the side. Then the examiner puts out 2 more dots in a horizontal line, and then one by one puts them under the box in full view of the child. And so basically what the child has to do is indicate how many dots are hiding under the box by pointing to the correct item in a multiple choice array. So the child does not have to engage in saying number words, using number words to get the answer. The next type of addition and subtraction problems are more conventional. They're very simple story problems, such as Jill has 2 pennies. Jim gives her 1 more penny. How many pennies does Jill have now? So children, they aren't shown representations, but at least they can visualize the pennies and maybe having, 1 more added and thinking about how many there are now. And then, of course, the second problem is a comparable problem involving subtraction. And then finally we get to the number combinations, which are the most conventional, that involve numbers or numerals and do not provide any explicit representations. Problems such as how much is 4 and 3 and how much is 7 take away 3. We do give children a number list to use to help them solve the addition and subtraction problems to see if they can. We tell children they can do anything they want to solve the problem, so they are also allowed to use their fingers or a pencil and paper to help them calculate. And again, the child's use of these types of strategies can provide important information regarding their thinking and how to help them enhance performance further. And then finally, I just wanted to discuss some research findings with the NSS. We found that the ability to solve those simple number combinations that I just showed you, such as how much is 3 and 4, even at the very beginning of kindergarten, are most strongly predictive of math achievement from 1st through 3rd grade. The correlation is about 0.7, so and it remains strong. So if you enter kindergarten having a good sense of number operations, you're more likely to do well. In early elementary school, it also predicts, at least in the state of Delaware, whether or not kids will pass or fail the state test in 3rd grade. And then kindergartners' abilities to compare numbers and to solve those number combinations I just mentioned uniquely predict their calculation fluency in 2nd grade over and above working memory, spatial ability, and language. So basically, if children, and what we found is young children who could solve those early number combinations at the beginning of kindergarten, they often use their fingers or some other strategy to help them get the answer. They haven't just memorized something, by rote association. They really kind of understand how to transform numbers. And so because they're using their fingers early, they also get off their fingers early and become fluent at an earlier grade level than children who start using their fingers later and then stay with them. We also found that those simple story problems are especially hard for young children from low-income families who often show little growth in this area between kindergarten and 1st grade, most likely because in addition to the number demands, they also have to be pretty familiar with language. Our NSS has high internal reliability such that the items are correlated with each other and indicating that they are tapping this construct of number sense. And in terms of convergent and divergent validity, I've already mentioned that the number sense screener is highly correlated with math performance through at least 3rd grade and probably even higher. Divergent validity means that although it is correlated with later reading performance as well, it's less correlated with reading than it is with math. So we are getting at the appropriate construct. So that's basically my introduction to the NSS, and I hope that people have questions. And Amy, you wanted to discuss the special offer?
Yes, great. Thanks, Nancy. That was helpful, and it was nice to see all of the examples for the different skills from the actual, from the screener on the slides. So we're happy to have everyone join us today, and as a thank you, we're offering a 20% discount on the NSS and other Brooks products. So the code's up there on your screen. How the NSS is sold, there's a set that you buy that includes the user's guide, which has information about administration and the technical information about the tool. There's the stimulus book that has the items that you show the child, like Nancy was showing on the slides. There's record sheets. That's shown in the upper right corner there. Sorry that image is a little blurry. That's the recording form where you actually jot down the child's answers and you score it. And the set comes with 25 record sheets, and then there's also a quick script for administering the screener. So if anyone has any questions, please, you can submit them in your GoToWebinar box now, and we do have a couple questions that have come in during the presentation. So Nancy, I'll go ahead and read some of those to you. I think we had a question came in during the webinar, and then also people asked when they were registering, who do you recommend administer the screener? Should it be a teacher or a paraprofessional, or does it matter?
Well, I think that the screener has been designed to be very easy to administer. So clearly teachers can administer it, and also paraprofessionals or other people who are helping in the classroom under the guidance of the teacher. The instructions are simple, the scoring is easy, so I think that it has a lot of flexibility in terms of who can administer the test.
Okay, great. How often should the screeners, just like the beginning of the kindergarten year, or do you recommend people use it to monitor progress?
The screener has norms for the beginning of kindergarten as well as the second part of kindergarten. So in terms of if you're wanting to get a score and see how children perform vis-a-vis their kindergarten peers, you could give it really at any time during the kindergarten year. We definitely recommend that you give it to children at the beginning of kindergarten, maybe not like the first day. Give them a little bit of time to get used to being in school, and then you can administer it. And then, of course, you could administer it again to monitor if you then, if you find the child is having some trouble in this area and provide some intervention. So you can give it again, or you can give parts of it to monitor how the child is doing, and then again at the end of the year. So it's very flexible in terms of how it's used. You can use basically to screen all children, or you can use it to look at children who are already identified as having problems to monitor their progress.
Okay, thanks. We have a question from a listener. So this was in reference to earlier you were going over the skills that kind of comprise what number sense is, and one of them was operating on small sets by adding or taking away items. And the listener asks, do you mean with actual objects or working with symbols? Or both, I guess.
That's an excellent question, and it looks at both. The nonverbal calculation tasks gets at children's ability to perform numerical transformations when objects or physical representations are present. The story problems, the representations are alluded to, but they're not physically present. And then, of course, the number combinations just provides the number words or the numerals. The child actually sees the number combination, and then it's read to the child. So, but in that instance, even on the number combinations, the child is encouraged to, use paper and pencil or their fingers or any other kind of representation that they have available. So it does give you a sense of whether the child can calculate with representation and without it, and kind of get a sense of where the needs are in that area.
Okay. We have a question from a listener about the scoring. So can you tell us more about how the scoring influences how to provide interventions for students?
Yes. The scoring, well, first of all, the scoring is very easy on the problems. It's basically you score whether the child gets the answer right or wrong to come up with a raw score. And I think the total number correct is 29. And then you can take the raw score and see how the child performs, relative to other kindergartners. But also, what the test encourages people to do too is to write down the actual responses that the child gave, and then also to indicate what strategies were used, if any could be observed to solve the problem. The test is not timed, so there is time to observe strategies and to see what the child is doing. And then in the manual we give, depending on what the child shows or what types of strategies they're using or what kind of responses they give, we have some suggestions for some things you could do to help that student. So it provides both quantitative and qualitative information, because we think, level of performance is important, but we also, I think this is the thing that makes the NSS unusual relative to other screeners that are like 1-minute screening tools. Like you can see, how many numbers can a kid count to in a minute or whatever. Ours is not a 1-minute tool. It's still efficient. It's like 15 minutes. But it also gives you a lot of information in terms of how the child's thinking about number and what kind of strategies they use to solve problems.
Great, thanks. That's helpful to hear more about that. Okay, so a question about the timing. So it appears that the number sense screener is not timed. And this listener asks, what are your thoughts on predictiveness of fluency measures of number recognition, quantity discrimination, and missing number in K-1?
Well, those are the ones you typically see, the very quick screeners. And those screeners do predict, at least they predict, performance in first grade. Often, I haven't seen a lot of data on them, how they predict, into second grade and beyond. But they don't give you much information on really what the child is doing. And I find I don't really like time measures in kindergarten, because this isn't really the time. There's so many reasons why a kindergartner might not perform well on a 1-minute test, because of behavioral issues, because they might just speak more slowly. There's so many individual differences at that age range that, yes, it's efficient to do a 1-minute screener or a 3-minute screener or whatever, but it doesn't really tell you exactly, what the child knows, what they're thinking, and it's kind of limited in terms of planning interventions. So, another thing you could do is give a quick screener and then follow it up with the number sense screener for kids who, where there might be questions about how they're performing. But, so I would say that the quick screeners are predictive, but they do, I'm not sure how how far out they predict, and there are, it certainly can, the 1-minute screeners that are timed might result in a lot of false positives if the child just, isn't really good at getting out answers very quickly, but they still might know a lot.
Great.
Great question, though.
Thanks. Yes, that was a good one. We have a question about cost. So the set, which includes the stimulus book and the user's guide and one package of the record sheets, so it's $89.95, and you can use the 20% discount that's up on your screen now. And then the replacement record sheets are sold in packages of 25 and for $30. Let's see. Okay, so we had a question about whether, has there been any use of the screener with children who have disabilities such as visual impairments or deaf children?
Well, we have not used it with that population in terms of when we developed our norms. We basically just, we worked with all kids who gave us permission in kindergarten and first grade, so we didn't remove kids because of any types of disabilities. Anyone who would be in a general kindergarten classroom was included. So I'm not positive in the normative data, how many, there probably were some kids that might have had milder visual and hearing impairments. But I think that the screener could definitely be adapted for those children. In terms of visual issues, the stimulus materials are fairly large, so most children should be able to see the stimulus materials, but on the other hand, I certainly think they could be enlarged further as well and used. And then in terms of hearing impairments, The verbal directions certainly could be presented in signs. And of course, a lot of the screener is visual. We try to keep the language to a minimum. So there are ways, and we also kind of have verbal and nonverbal contrasts to see how the children do. So I do think the screener is easy to adapt for children with a range of types of disabilities.
Great, thanks for explaining that. We have a question from a listener. Do you offer intervention strategies when weaknesses are found?
We do in the guide. We present some cases and different patterns of performance that you might see on the NSS, and then we provide some recommendations. We also very soon are coming out with the NSI, which is the number sense intervention, which is a researched intervention that was designed to help children develop number sense in kindergarten, or even older children who are very low performing, which is shown to be very effective. So look for the NSI, should be out pretty soon, that has been designed to go with the NSS, but you will find some suggestions and directions for help in the NSS.
Great, thanks. Let's see. Here. We have, one of the listeners was asking about, so in the beginning you were talking about how kids from low-income homes have poor starts in math. And this listener asked, do you know what it is about low-income homes, particularly that give children poor starts in math? Has research been done?
There has been some research, and we've done a little bit of research in that area, but in general it seems like these kids may be exposed to less math talk during the preschool period, such that parents may talk to them less about number concepts. Many of these kids will have had fewer preschool experiences, less environmental stimulation that would give kids opportunities to develop their number skills kind of through their day-to-day living. And another issue is that some studies have shown that using board games are especially effective for developing number concepts in young children, and board games tend to be more of a middle to class and above phenomenon, and often lower income families don't engage as much in board games because they're expensive to buy and they're time consuming and so on. But so again, that would just sort of feed into this idea that the low-income children, it isn't that they're not capable of learning number, because our studies have shown that they are, but they just come to school with less exposure, less experience that helps them take advantage of the math curriculum in kindergarten and first grade.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Let's see, we have a couple more questions here. Okay, this is a question about using it for RTI, for response to intervention. Is there a standardization of response ranges in order to collect data across a school or a district for RTI data?
We do not have I don't believe we have that information at this point. And I'm not sure I completely understand the standardization of response ranges, but basically what we have is that we, show you what seems to be, an appropriate score, what seems to be an at-risk score in the first part of kindergarten, as well as the end of kindergarten. But certainly the school districts could use the data and, collect data on the NSS in ways that would be very useful to their own population.
Great, thank you. We have a question about, and I think this kind of ties into the intervention, the recommendations that you were talking about that were in the user's guide, but are there any recommendations for working with students to help them improve on each area of the assessment?
Yes. We do have some general recommendations in the NSS manual, And again, then we will, our NSI, number sense intervention, work specifically on these areas. But I think that you will be able to get quite a bit of information from reading the NSS manual in terms of what delays in particular areas of number mean and how you can help these children improve and succeed.
Great. Is there any specific training required to use the screener?
Well, I think that definitely a kindergarten teacher could easily use it and interpret the findings. But I think that even lay people could probably give it fairly easily with, if they read the manual. And the important thing to remember is you have to follow the procedures pretty carefully if you want to use the normative data.
Right.
But on the other hand, if you want to get qualitative information and get ideas about children's problem solving, you can also adapt to the measure to your own purposes. So it has been designed to be very easy to give and very easy to score, so it can be used by different types of people. I mean, certainly it could be used by school psychologists and other specialists, math specialists, but we don't want it just to be that type of tool. We want it to be to be accessible to a lot of people. And probably, I mean, it probably could even be given by a parent if they were interested.
Great, thanks. We have a follow-up question about the interventions that are coming out. So do any of, and the ones in the user's guide too, do any of the interventions involve parents or caregivers? For example, a child taking home a board game for a week?
We do. When we gave the NSI, we often gave, and I believe this is in the interventions too, that we gave the children homework activities, generally related to paper and pencil tasks like writing. Because in the NSI, we didn't want to spend too much time on having the kids, learn how to write numbers and so on. So we often gave those as homework activities. We don't have anything structured about board games, but games such as Chutes and Ladder and Candyland and things that require kids to, go up and, to count and move up and down a game board are especially useful for young children. And if you're interested more, Robert Siegler has done a lot of work in that area. Oh, and yes, and there is one game in the NSI, the Great Race game, that is actually a part of the intervention that kids are given, and they play during that time period, and they definitely could take that home as well.
Great, thanks.
Sure.
Okay, so if anyone has any questions still remaining out there, please go ahead and submit them in your question box now. We had a question about of whether they could see an example of a first grade prompt. So we probably can't show on the screen, but so are the first grade, so if you do it in first grade, are the examples that you showed on the screen earlier the same items, or is that just for the kindergarten?
No, those are the same items.
Okay.
They just get harder in terms of level of difficulty.
Okay.
So, and typically the lower numerosity problems are more relevant to kindergartners, and the ones involving larger numbers are more relevant to first graders. But the first grade part of it's only for the beginning of first grade, and the first grade piece is probably more relevant to kids who have persistent problems. A lot of children, typically achieving children, by the time they get to first grade would be pretty good on a lot of the items, except for maybe some of the calculations on the NSS.
Great, thanks.
We are at some point hoping to extend the age range because we do have some data in terms of that.
Great, so more possibly to come.
Yes, absolutely. And this is sort of a work in progress.
Yes. Okay, so I think we've come to the end of all of our questions here. So Nancy, thank you so much for joining us, and everyone who's listening, we hope you found this informative. And as I said earlier, you'll receive an email tomorrow with a link to a recording of this webinar. So feel free to share that with colleagues or to rewatch it yourself. So we really appreciate you joining us, and thank you, Nancy.
Oh, thank you. It was a pleasure. Great questions, and I'm happy to answer future questions also.
Great. So I hope everyone has a great day.
Thanks. You too.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.